Welcome to the Healers Podcast, where we inspire and guide healers through business expansion. We give voice to incredibly abundant healers to share their stories. We dive into the quantum field to unlock the energies of conscious creation. We also develop digital tools to help you grow, which you can find on healless.com. I'm your host, Yuli, and I'm grateful you chose to join this space. Now let's go deep.
Hello, my dear friends. Super excited for this episode. Today we have a special treat, Eva Gajzer. She's the ultimate business healer. She founded Oneness, a strategy and design agency amplifying impact for conscious leaders and businesses. She's a brand visionary who helps organizations become mindful of their actions and the experiences they create. She works with the likes of Alicia Keys, Higher Dose, and was one of the people behind Dove's The Real You movement. And now she works with startups and healers to help shape their story. Eva is also a full mesa carrier shaman within the Clara lineage and a magical awakening and Reiki practitioner. She has practiced yoga and meditation since 1996 and holds monthly new moon fire ceremonies and sweat lodges in her beautiful property in Hudson Valley, as well as virtual business healing circles. So you can see from this bio, just reading this, it was just this amazing energy combining, business, spirituality. This is kind of my favorite kind of conversation. So I cannot wait to dive in. And today we're going to talk about a very juicy topic of personal branding and identity for healers. And as you guys know, I always like to set intention for each episode. And my intention today is to truly inspire healers to show up in the world fully in their most authentic, true identity without hiding behind society norms. We need healers. And the more comfortable you are within your personal brand and what you're offering to the world, the more people you're able to heal and inspire. So with that said, I would love to introduce Eva and have her set her own intention as well.
Thank you so much, Yuli, for having me and for sharing this work with your community. I really appreciate it. My intention for this podcast is that people really feel into their genuine nature and magic and bring that out into the world through the way that they sound, their fields, their energetic field, and really explore perhaps ways that they haven't considered looking at their business and looking at the way that they've shared their storytelling. I'm a Sagittarius, so I'm a natural expander. So I want to help people expand and see a much greater picture.
I love it.
Thank you so much.
I love expansion, and just having your expansive energy on this podcast is very, I can feel it already. So before we dive in, I have so many questions for you. Can you just talk a little bit about how do you combine all those sides of your personality, all those incredible skills and learnings that you've gained through your life? How do you bring it all together into the business world?
It's really this skill that I have, and it's been confirmed in my astrology and my human design. And it's that I'm really bringing in the unseen and I'm helping to create the actual grounding for it. So it's the meeting of the two. And that's the really big picture of the work that's being done. There's a whole process within that. I first started out as a luxury fashion buyer for 5 years and realized very quickly that was not what I wanted to do, but I loved it. And it was my first kind of entree into great branding, working with mostly Italian and French houses. Really becoming a strategic planner and starting my career at Ogilvy and Mather and working with a lot of Fortune 50 brands and also working with charities. I learned the real core of what it takes to build a great brand and what it takes to rejuvenate a brand as well, coming from a lens of strategy and design. And because I had such a good foundation there, and then I as I left Ogilvy, I started consulting, and I started the work that I'm doing now, and it's evolved over time. I had a partner at one time; he's a full-time shaman now, but basically, we were doing a lot of business strategy as well. We were building the whole business plan and figuring out all the financials and how things grow, to also figuring it out how to scale a business as well. And at the time, it really was just for, luxury and all of that, because I have a deep passion for craft and for artisans. So it was like, that's who I wanted to work with, because there's inherently something so incredible. And when you're working with artists, it's really about bringing spirit down and working, with spirit one-on-one. So it was like, I felt really good there. However, I wasn't being fed. And I had my awakening in 2008 when the economy collapsed and I lost all my clients. And that's really when my practice really came together. It's definitely evolved now that I'm a mom. And we're very busy. We have a lot of clients. But essentially, I was practicing yoga daily, Qigong as well. And I became a Qigong teacher, and meditating, praying, mantra, working with healers, doing a lot of, and also detoxing. I detoxed for 2.5 years. I was very sick as a child. So I had to kind of really get a lot of things out of my body and rebuild. And through that work, I realized I had this grand awakening at Jivamukti one day that in 2008, that I could be doing something called conscious branding. And I could actually pick who our clients were. And I could really shape that. And through taking care of myself and being a clear vessel, the work I do in terms of strategy and design and business planning and all of this, it would, it's like I'm like basically shaping a diamond. And that's purely my work, is to channel and support my clients. I'm not coming here with ego. And that's really how all of this started. And then over the years, I've continued to learn modalities and put them into practice. I also have a healing practice and I see clients, but I also bring my healing work to my clients too, because entrepreneurs, whether they're just starting out or they have been doing this for decades, it's like the fast track to evolution, being on your own or working with a team and just building a business. You're going to have fear come up. You're going to have blocks. So it's like part of that process is weaving in the healing work when it comes up through the process that we have, which takes about 6 to 9 months. So I bring in that work through that process. I'm also a clairvoyant, so that really helps throughout the process because, I have a good sense of what's needed. And I can really gather a lot of that very quickly. But then, there's a process. It's like the onion unpeeling and all of that.
That is so incredible and so unique. I genuinely, in my entire career in New York, in the branding and advertising world, I never met anyone like you. And I just remember when we met, I was just so thrilled just to get to know you and your energy and to know that there's people like that out in the world. I mean, I don't know, maybe you were one of a kind, truly, but it's just encouraging to know that this energy exists out there. Right?
I think there's a few people. You're one of them for sure. But there's more and more, I think, as this awakening continues.
Yeah.
And people are being activated and it's happening a lot faster now.
Yeah. It's just so refreshing, to bring this like deep spiritual connection into the business world, because I think for so many years, for so many decades, we were kind of just running on high, especially anyone who worked ever in like advertising and, big, large scale brands. You just run on this autopilot of, like canned messaging and, things that sell and and it can be very successful once you kind of figure out the formula. and coming in from a completely different side. And like you said, leaving your ego aside, right? And truly working to help people uncover their essence, I think is just much needed right now in all kinds of branding, not just for healers.
I agree. We have a lot of work to do. I mean, it's why I also perceive the work that I do. I am being a healer and doing this work because I want to help many businesses do even greater work and create greater connection. And, that's putting myself in a position where I can help so many more people by working on a few businesses. It's like we can touch many, many people and support them to bring in more light and to just really help people wherever they are through whatever the business is, whether, it's through a greater connection to nature through a business or to art or, just doing energy work, or there's so many businesses, different types of businesses that we work on. It's really fascinating. We're even working with farmers. So yeah.
That's really cool. So let's bring it back for a second to the healing community, because that's really our audience. This is who we are here to serve. Why is it so important for healers to have a brand and a representing image? I mean, it's obvious that if you're a brand and you want to advertise to your audience, you need to have that. But for healers, particularly someone who just practices under their own name and just doing their craft, why is it important to take this step?
I mean, the number one thing is trust. And I think when you really create a great brand, and I'll get into that, what that means, you really want to be perceived when someone thinks of you, when someone feels you in their heart. You really want to have a beautiful sense of who they are. And we do that when we're working with a healer, whether it's, in person or on Zoom or on the phone. However, it's really important to take that experience and visualize it and develop a strategy and to draw out, that terminology and create that language to share that story. Because otherwise, people are going to have an inconsistent experience. And that's essentially what a brand is going to be doing when they're doing a great job with their work. It's creating a sense of consistency. And it's not like you have to do so much. It's just that, having a sense of who you are and how you're going to talk about yourself, having a beautiful design. I mean, design in particular for me is really important. So having great imagery of yourself, even if it's just a portrait, it's fine. But having a great picture of yourself that you love to convey yourself, having like a beautiful logo, having a sense of a color palette and typography, that way you can easily have your website look a certain way where the newsletter, the social, all of the touch points, they're all very cohesive, because you're not going to show up as a person as like a raver, a goth, and like all these different people. It would freak someone out. There's a sense of who you are, and a brand essentially needs to do the same thing when it's out in the world, and that needs to be merged. And so those are just some of the key elements of the brand that I feel are really important for any healer to have. And it's really challenging for healers, I would add, because they're dealing with the other 99% of reality, and that may not be their gift. So I feel like that's why this business that you're growing and you're going to be serving so many people is so vital, because everybody needs to be empowered so that they can do their magic. And, you can just give them like the wind beneath their wings in a lot of ways. Our process, it's like a big thing. But for someone, even for, very established teachers, I feel like healers could be very supportive to them.
Yeah, that's exactly the mission and the hope.
Yeah.
and your process. I mean, I have so much respect for that. Again, coming from this world, and I totally get it, that it is a process that takes 6 to 9 months, probably more, because you are like changing your own perception, right? And you're changing habits and how you operate on a daily basis, because you have to become that identity. I mean, it has to be part of you. You have to be part of whatever you're creating. So it's a process. It's not something you just dream up one day and wake up and you become that brand, right? It's like this evolution.
Definitely. And then things just start to click, and then, businesses grow and really incredible things start to happen for people, for sure.
So how do you suggest for someone who is really starting out, like now, let's say we inspire them to really think about their identity. Where do you suggest to start for kind of like an average or aspiring healer? Yeah, on creating those key identity elements.
I mean, I'm going to always start with research. So you need to know where you fit into the landscape. And there are probably, a number of like-minded healers out there, or we can call them businesses. And it's really important to take a look at how they brand themselves strategically, with their writing, their copywriting, with their design. And then you could even look at their marketing tactics. Like, what is their marketing strategy? How are they engaging with everyone? That's a really important first step. And people can do that on their own. And I always recommend to people, why don't you pull your human design? We work with human design as a big part of our research process, amongst a few other methods, BG5 as well, which is the business arm of human design, numerology, and there's other things too. But all that is going to give you a sense of who you are and your magic. And then from there, I recommend really figuring out, what's the mission? What is this mantra, this gift that you're going to give to the world, to your audience by doing this work? It's really important to get very clear on that. And then really think about, how are you positioning yourself differently than these other people? And it's because we're not necessarily copying anyone, but it's like, what makes you unique? And getting that human design chart is really going to help. You want to look at your incarnation cross. You want to look at your channels. You want to look at your north and south node, depending on your age. Those are just a few of the areas I really recommend. And then from there, there's a lot of different components of a brand strategy, but, people can do the research and figure it out. But essentially, like, what's the gift you're giving to your audience? How are you doing it differently? How are you doing it unique to you? What's this legacy? What's like the big picture? What does success look like? And, what are your values? Like, what is your philosophy? Like, what do you stand for? Figuring out what those pillars are or what those value words are, those are really important. And then from there, that should inform what your design is going to look like. What does your logo look like? Is it really soft, warm, and fuzzy? Or are you working with more of coming in and like working on the darkness? I've had clients across a range that are healers. And it's like, there are certain healers that are working with different types of modalities, and their intentions are different too. And you really want to be able to show up aligned with that frequency. Are you using a serif font, sans serif? And what is your color palette? Like, what are your colors? Really thinking about the chakras. And, there's an incredible book that I'm just wrapping up by Annie Besant called Thought Forms. And it was written like around 1900. There's a lot of talk of color in that book. And that book was actually a huge awakener for Kandinsky and a lot of very interesting artists. And it talks about the energy of color. And it may or may not resonate, but these are important things to consider because they're going to psychologically convey who you are. Can you afford to hire an illustrator? Because maybe you have a range of ways. Maybe you're an herbalist, or you have just a range of ways that you're supporting someone. You may need to not only have a logo and a color palette and a typography system, but you might need other graphic elements to begin to convey that story. And especially if you have packaging, if you're creating goods, like thinking about all of that. And then from there, I really think having really, really solid photography is very, very important. There needs to be an investment in photography. People will totally barter and do deals. Be open, push yourself to go somewhere uncomfortable, find a great photographer, have one photo taken, or, try to have, a few hours of photo shoot taken, just so that you have storytelling to work with. You don't necessarily want to use the same picture over and over again. You want to have, hopefully, a range of emotions that you're sharing, because your story is going to evolve. Let's say if you have a newsletter once a month, you may have a different photo to convey a different concept. That's the focus of that month. And then you want to, perhaps use social media or not, totally up to you. You're going to use these mediums, and it's important to show that on a website too. I also recommend with photography to, if you can, really show what that environment looks like when you're working with someone, because it's going to help someone visualize that. It's great if you have all these beautiful photos, maybe they're in nature and all of that, but it's like, if you're a shaman or you're using tarot, I want to see you sitting down working with all of that. Or if you're working with flowers and you're creating mandalas and whatever, it's like, maybe have a friend come in, and they don't have to necessarily be shot from the face. It could be from the side, or if they're open, great. But I want to see you showing up, working and supporting that person. It's going to help convey the story. I also recommend, with photography, show the hands. It's really get a few close-ups of the hands. There's such personality shared there, because it's not always going to be about your face. It's like you want to show like different elements of things. You want to have photography as a story.
I think you just gave so many great ideas in this one, couple of minutes talk. I just wanted to emphasize too, something that I think is super important is to have those photos in action, right? To help people visualize what does the session with you look like. And I think a lot of healers kind of default for, a nice, friendly looking, maybe shot, a headshot, but it's really, people these days still wondering about some of those modalities. They still have no idea what they're signing up for. So the more information you can give them, walk them through that session, how, even if you are seeing them in person, how does your office look like, just to make them feel more comfortable, just to give an idea. Are they going to be sitting down? Are they going to be laying down? What is going to be around them? What is going to happen? I think the more, yes, we want to be mystical with those experiences, but not everyone is up for those unknown kind of surprises. People want to know as much as possible about what you do and how you work. And I think it's so important to kind of propel this field forward, right? The more information that is professionally looking, that is friendly and inviting, the more of those visuals we put out there, the more people are going to feel more comfortable trying some of those modalities and techniques.
Absolutely. I mean, it's about creating connection. It's about creating a feeling. That's essentially what a brand is. And photography is a very, very, very powerful way of doing that. And you're going to need to use it throughout most things that you're putting out into the world. Right. So, and just also, it helps not only you, but it helps all the healers, because you're helping people just get more comfortable with being in a new experience that hopefully in 5 or 10 years, it's less of a new experience for people. This just becomes a way of life that we're seeking these alternative ways of receiving support.
I love it. And I also love your earlier suggestion of using exchange, right? Because if you're just starting out, you can't afford to invest in photography and some of those other resources. I mean, you have your gift, so use it to.
Totally. And, this is the thing. Most creatives, I don't know if a lot of healers know this, they're way more open than other people, like an accountant or someone in insurance. Like you go to a creative person and they're like, okay, yeah, like I'm open. Yeah, okay, great. And just go for it because they're most often really open. I mean, in a shoot I recently did, I did a healing for the photographer, like during the shoot, like we were having a little bit of it. And I was like, let me give you a little something for a few minutes. And it just like changed everything. It was lightning in a bottle.
That is so amazing. I love
So don't be afraid to do it during the shoot either. I feel like it really helps.
I love your practical advice. Don't offer it to accountants or lawyers. Just maybe start with creatives. They're more receptive.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
you can try.
I hope there are accountants and lawyers out there that are open. I mean, our lawyer is a Reiki master. So, and I think our team is super interesting because I've cultivated a really incredible group of people that are all healers in their own way that help us with all the different activities that we have and do for our clients. So
that is really impressive.
Yeah, I love it.
I would love to ask about one very important element of branding, and it's the selection of a healer's name and a brand name. I think a lot of people also kind of, so especially people that come to this world maybe from other industries or other professions that they had kind of like in their previous life before they became healers. What is your recommendation? Because there's so many possibilities, right? They can use their personal, like real given name and birth. They can use, they can create a whole new identity. They can use like a brand name for a practice. There's so many possibilities. Like, what does that process look like?
Well, this is a huge challenge that often arises for folks. And often someone will be very mindful of ego and not necessarily want to use their name, but they haven't necessarily thought about it in terms of what that's going to do in the future. And it's going to create a tremendous amount of more work because when you decide not to use your own name and you create, let's say, the name Vanilla for your brand, then not only will you have to create that whole brand and business, but you're also going to have to create your personal name. And that's a lot of work. So I like to really push back on people and do some hand-holding, do some work around, well, what if we did use your name? How can we get comfortable there? Because that's really what's going to be best for you. It's like if you're creating a healing art studio, or a method, then absolutely we need to create another name. But in most cases for a healer, they should really use their own name, especially when you're starting out. It's like people like take on so much and they're like, oh, I want to create this brand and it's this name. And it's like, well, okay, but like, we really need to start for the first few years in building up you and making you a thought leader in this space. And then based on how that's going, then why don't you think about creating this other entity? Because that might not be what we want to, it's like, the cart before the horse. So this is a very, very important area to really face and look at. And this is where we can use the ego in a positive way by using someone's own name, if that's the best decision for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's a great advice. Thank you. Thank you for that. And let's talk a little bit about the extension of the brand and all the key elements into the various media and social media channels. I mean, there are so many these days, right? Like, yes, we create this brand, we create this mission, we know our colors, we have our logo. And now I feel like for most people, the work just begins because now you have to also translate all of that. You also have to create like your social media identity and what is, I know it's a big topic and we can probably have an episode on each channel, right? But kind of like in a nutshell, what do you suggest? How do you suggest to look at the social media channels, and if at all, right? And which ones, and how do you choose? Because obviously, we as a one practitioner who mostly focuses on their craft, there cannot possibly be on every social channel, no matter how trendy it is and how tempting it is. What do you suggest people? How do you even start that process, deciding on which, and then how do you translate your brand into that?
Social media is like a very hot topic, and that it's something we really have to be wary of where it's going and what's happening. And I would highly recommend, if we're, talking about like sharing marketing tactics here with what touch points we're going to be using, to first and foremost work on your newsletter. Having actual email addresses and connecting with your community is number one. If you have not done the exercise yet of going through, let's say, your Gmail account or your whatever email you're using, you need to make sure you're adding everyone, first name, last name, if you can, and email address to your address book. It is number one. The number one way of having a client book you is not going to be through social media. It's going to be through your newsletter. And that you want to have all efforts drive to that. I would even say that's where your social media, that's the number one focus, is getting people to sign up for your email address, especially if you're starting out. I would just be very, very thoughtful and use your intuition with what social media is best for you. And I wouldn't do all of them, or I wouldn't do a bunch. I would do one very, very well and pick which one that is and do it based on, maybe even pull up some statistics on how the audiences are breaking down. You can pull that up. Like if you want to look at Instagram and see who mostly is on there, and make sure that's aligned with who your audience is. Thinking about who is coming to you for sessions, because it's probably a couple generations, 1 or 2 generations, maybe 3, but there's a core audience in there that you really want to think about. And for a lot of people, it's typically Saturn return, Uranus return, or Chiron return, which is basically your late 20s, your, around 40 to 44, your midlife crisis. And then when you hit around 49, 50, and you have this crossroads. Those are typically times that I find all of our clients are helping those groups. And you want to look at your age and where that is, because your age group, you're going to grow with your audience. So digging in and making sure those people are there, you really have history of it going well for you. I'm a little wary of TikTok just because of a whole bunch of reasons that, people probably know about and they can research. I would just be very thoughtful there. I'm not a huge fan of social media. I hire people to figure out those strategies, and I hire teams to execute for clients. We train them with the branding, where oneness is much more foundational in terms of the work that it does. We're really putting strategies in place and informing. And then we hire, as part of our business work, the teams of people to then execute. But newsletter. And all the stats are out there to prove that is like the best way to really grow your audience. And that there's a whole way of doing that. And there's a lot of different things. And I really recommend getting into all that research.
I think it's a very solid advice. And just to add to your newsletter point, it's really the only way to own your audience. Because remember, on social media, you don't own their followers, right? They can shut down the service or change algorithm any day.
Right.
They can delete your account. I mean, there's so many stories that you hear and things are happening. And really, I mean, not to mention the fact that you can't ever extract their emails from social media, right?
Completely.
So it's really the only way to own your clients and your audience is to have their contact. So thanks for bringing that up. A very important point.
Make sure you're being like an organized librarian and putting that into your address book. I cannot recommend that enough. Like most people don't do that. And it's so important. You need to be nuts about it. When a new client comes in or person, save their email address. Like it's just part of your process of doing email.
I love this. We talked a lot about the foundational elements, and I would love to dig more into the subject of expansion and scaling practice. Because I think a lot of our listeners are probably at the point where they have already practice established. They figured out most of the key elements, right? I know that people that come to you, they really come for that Sagittarius advice that you were talking about. All right. How do I take it now to the next level? How do I reach more people? How do I heal more people? How do I become a teacher? Maybe, going from kind of like a single one-on-one practice to more like a group practice, or create other products. Like, what does that scaling process look like for you?
Well, it's going to start first with what's the history? I think it's important to look at, hopefully you've been keeping track of how your revenue's coming in. So, money is energy. So clients have been hiring you in a certain capacity. You have X amount of sessions a week or a month, and you know what your pricing has been. And you really want to have a good sense of what does that look like? And if you don't have it, don't worry. Start now. And you really get a sense of what that looks like. And you want to be able to think about this for a lot of healers, I would say, as there's a certain way of supporting a number of people and then a group and then one-on-one. And then maybe there's even another way of supporting people with some easy downloadable education that you invest in creating something really beautiful and really valuable, and that's offered. But you want to think about your business in all these different ways. And I know it might be getting overwhelming just hearing this, but once again, go back to research. Look at those co-minded other healers, teachers, guides, and see what they're doing. And just get a whiteboard or just get some paper and start to dream, like, what does my business model look like? Make a map and put all the different offerings that you'd love to have, and then get really realistic. What's possible for you this year? What's possible this quarter and next quarter? Don't load yourself up and blow out your chakras. Like, really think about this as a way of sustainable growth. You want to be able to still show up for all your one-on-one clients, but then how can you start to maybe bring in a group effort? Or is this a good time before the holidays to really put together some sort of downloadable education? Another way I recommend scaling, it's like partner up with someone or two people, do an event, do a workshop. It could be, on Zoom. It could be in person. That way you're going to grow your audience at the same time. See how you like that. Maybe you'd like it. Maybe it's not really for you. But it's an important vehicle of growing audience when you're in collaboration. And you don't necessarily have to find someone who's doing what you do. Maybe that's someone, you're an acupuncturist and you're bringing in a sound bath. And then there's someone who's doing something else. It's like, have fun with this.
That was a very, again, solid strategy, how to look at expansion, and something that I think easily people can kind of start putting on the map and just at least as a plan. And I think, again, I feel like in this episode, you gave so many great juicy nuggets that were really inspiring people to just think about their brand and think about their expansion. Is there anything else that you feel like you have a message for to put out there as kind of the last big piece?
Really get ahead of the business and put a plan together. If you're really, really intend to create something very valuable. I think it's important to take a step back and take a look at what you're growing and how many people you're helping and how tired or energized you are, and really think about making maps with how you'd like to grow your business. I want all the healers to support as many people in a healthy way that they can, really getting in charge of our lives rather than our lives happening to us, I think is just a really big thing. Creating intentions as we began this session, I think that's a great way to think about what's the next 3 years, what's the next 5 years look like, and go backwards from there. So thank you so much, Yuli.
That is so beautiful. Thank you. It's such a treat to have you with us. And again, for all your wisdom and for the fact that you have this service for healers is just, it's incredible. So thank you, Eva.
Really appreciate it.